She won most talkative in high school, and she has been running her mouth ever since. Welcome to the Lisa Fisher Said podcast with your host, Lisa Fisher.
Okay, we're starting off 2024 with the best way. People getting healthy. Jen Stevens, I call you the mother of intermittent fasting. And I love it that a new book has been published because you just start hitting those, you get on the keyboard there. When was your first book written? What year?
Yeah, I wrote it in 2016.
And wasn't that just like for the school teachers there at Augusta? Like it wasn't really, you didn't know you were going to be a worldwide star.
No, Lord, no. It actually is kind of funny. I was running a Facebook group that had grown to include people that I didn't know. Like, how rude. Who are these
And it
people
was like
that keep coming in and I don't know
Right, it was
you?
like 10,000 people.
Not yet.
That was
Not yet. Not
wasn't
in
even that
2016.
big.
No, in 2016, when I started writing the book, it was like 1,500. I mean, it was not very big at all. And I mean, when I say how rude, I love that people join. So don't get me wrong.
Right.
But they came in and they didn't know who I was. They just randomly joined this group. And then they had questions. And then they would argue. And then they would say, well, I, put lemon in my water and it works. And I'm like, I'm tired of explaining. I had a pinned post back in, this is, 2016. Like I said, I had a pinned post in the group and I kept adding stuff to it. Like, read this, look at that, here's a resource. And it got crazy long. And I kept telling people, go read the pinned post. And it was a hodgepodge. And people said, well, I just want to read a book. What book should I read? And every single book out there had some flaws. Like, I love Dr. Burt Herring, but his Fast 5 book, he's like, drink diet sodas, whatever.
Yeah, he did say that.
He's very loosey-goosey about that. And I'm like, well, but ignore that. But, the 5-hour window is good. And then Jason Fung had come out with the obesity code, and it was fabulous.
Which is too sciencey.
But he doesn't tell you what to do. And
No.
his only plan is like alternate daily fasting in the back. And I'm like, there's no book I can send people to. I'm a school teacher. I'm going to write one. Yes, to give to my friends, but also for these, 1,500 people or however many there were. Maybe it was up to 3,000 by then. I can't remember completely, but however many it was a fraction of what it would end up. But I wrote it just to give people all the best advice in one location.
And it was self-published and you sold it on Amazon, right?
And it's still self-published and it's still on Amazon. Delay, Don't Deny, Living an Intermittent Fasting Lifestyle, still available 7 years later.
So does your publisher not want to come in then and publish it under, are you St. Martin's Press? I forgot.
I am with St. Martin's Press, which is a division of Macmillan. They do, they would like to have it under the umbrella.
I don't want you to.
But it's financially,
It's better.
I've had this conversation with my editor many times, and they may be able to figure out, it just depends. But when you self-publish, you make, an X number of dollars per, per copy sold. Whereas if you have a traditional publisher, it's this much, because it's their book, not yours.
Right.
So I still retain control and I get a lot more money from every copy sold, even if it's just, a tiny few copies sold, but it's really not tiny. It still sells every day. So if they were able to come up with the right amount of financial incentive, they could publish it. But
that's right.
Money talks. Now, it does.
So, well, let's just go through what you have here, your history.
Okay.
You started fasting. Your story is, you said you fasted and then you didn't really fast, but you really started fasting. Was that 2014?
Yeah, it was 2014. We're recording this the very end of November. This is my 10th holiday season as an intermittent faster.
Awesome. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Which is free, which people are thinking, why is that significant? Because there's freedom. We did not fret over one piece of turkey or cheesecake or if our pants would fit the next day. Doesn't even cross our mind.
No. And they did. They did fit the next day.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you followed an intermittent fasting lifestyle.
Yeah.
So you started 2014. You had almost 100 pounds to lose. Were you
I
at
lost
80 something?
I lost 80 pounds.
80 pounds. Okay.
I was at 210 pounds and I'm 5'5" So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And small, you have small parts. You've been in my home. You're
I'm
a petite
little.
woman. Yeah, you're little. So that's just incredible. So that's 2014. Then you started thinking, well, Facebook, that's a good way to communicate and just answer these questions. And then that blew up. How big did that initial Facebook group get to?
My combined groups the 1 meal a day group, the Delay
Oh,
Don't
yeah.
Deny group, the advanced group, we got up to almost 500,000 combined members. And really the reason I started it is not because I wanted to spread the word to anyone beyond myself and my friends. Seriously, when I started that first Facebook group in 2015, it was because I didn't like the vibe in the groups I was in. Because again, people are arguing about stuff. And I'm like, I don't want to do all that. I don't want to argue with people on social media. That's like the least fun thing to do. Even in 2015, I knew that already.
Truth. Right.
And so in 2015, I started my first group, and it was me. And I put my husband in it. He was not an intermittent faster at that time, but you cannot not start a group with one person. I'd have two. So he was in it just as a
that's so
placeholder. I
cute.
know. And it was August of 2015. And it was a place for me and my friends to come and talk about how we were doing intermittent fasting. And again, like I said, people just started wandering in. But like early days, we talked about anything. I remember saying, hey, what deodorant are y'all using? I mean, stuff like that.
Well, I used what you told me to use. So
Are you using Lumi?
Yep, because you told me to.
Oh my God, it's
Because
so good.
I tried, and I do love the clean products that I use from Beauty Counter.
Beauty
I do
Counter, love them. Their
But
deodorant.
I'm in the South, and my pit started
Yeah.
stinking in August, and I messaged you, and you said, go Lumi, and I just wanted to make sure it was safe and clean, and you said yes.
Yeah.
So here we
Well,
are.
I love it. They sponsored my podcast, but this
they
is not a
do?
sponsored conversation. I just
No, it is
literally
not.
love them because
No.
I had tried natural deodorant and people always said, well, mine works. And I would try it. And
I
I'm like,
know.
well, no, it doesn't.
Me too.
But Lumi's the first one that works. A lot of them have like coconut oil and stuff in there, and it stains my clothes because I guess I'm heavy handed. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, maybe that was it. But
Yeah.
no, I still go to the trough and see what Jen's saying. So, but just to get everybody up to date, you kind of left Facebook and you did something really brilliant. You Mark Zuckerberg this thing,
Yeah.
and you made your own community.
I did. Well, it's just, the thing about Facebook, and I left Facebook with my community in 2021 when we were right at 500,000 people. It was a hard decision to make because, I had had a New York Times bestseller by that point, and people were listening to my podcast and still buy my books. And I thought, if I leave Facebook, am I blowing it all up and no one will ever, the secret to my success has been Facebook and everything's going to go to zero. And I despised Facebook so much by that point, the work that I was doing because of the arguing and it was stealing my
censorship
soul.
too. They were starting censorship.
It got to the point I didn't care if it blew up everything. It was going to be worth it because it was like literally felt like a really bad, like traumatic relationship.
Yeah.
Because people were in a highly agitated state also in early 2021, if you know what I mean. But it was really, really hard. Instead of helping people, all I was doing was managing stuff, like managing people who were mad because we told them they couldn't have lemon. I mean, it was awful. So leaving Facebook was one of the best decisions I ever made. Now, I loved Facebook and I'm grateful, believe it or not, to being able to have grown my platform there. But they stopped showing things to people. Like groups don't work the way they used to in 2015. It's really, really different. If I tried to start something on Facebook today, it wouldn't work the same.
Anytime I complain about it, my son says, so Mom, you're telling me the man who owns the business, you're mad at the way he's set out rules that don't benefit you and you pay zero for it? And I'm like, you're right. So I have to back off and just go back to my place, but
it's true.
You were smart to do that. It's the Delay Don't Deny group and anyone can join it. And there's a small monthly fee to be a part of it. And then I guess you still have moderators though, right? That still kind of manage
we don't even
conversations.
Need them. No, we don't need to. It's if you go to jenstevens.com/community, you can find the Delay Don't Deny community. And I mean, I have two admins that are like really like helped me set it all up and helped me manage it from the back end. However, we don't need to moderate content. We don't have people who are mad. It's not apparently $9.99 a month keeps away anyone with a bad attitude. Who knew?
This is the truth. Trolls, and that's, the someone who just is on internet just to stir up trouble, to poke the bear, that they don't want to do it.
They're not going to pay $9.99 a month. And it's not very much. I wanted it to be, reasonable so that anyone could join. Like literally, if you're doing intermittent fasting, you're going to save more than $9.99 a month just in the fact that you're not driving through getting lattes or you're not eating breakfast in the morning anymore.
It's unbelievable. You're right.
So you'll actually save money, but you're in a place that's safe where we're having conversations that are deeper, and we're not just trying to manage problems. We don't have problems. It's amazing.
Well, does it drive you crazy? Because one thing that I know when people have groups as large as yours got, then the same question comes up,
Oh, yeah.
which is the reason you wrote a book about
Yeah.
things like, can I chew gum during the fast?
Right.
Do you just say, look at the pin posts there too? Or do you
I
just
used
answer
to.
it?
But, now the people who are finding me and coming to my community are a more educated group because they didn't just accidentally wander into a Facebook group that they don't know how they got there. They had to go to my website. That means they know who I was before they got there. They know something about me because they listen to my podcast. So they already know. But, I have a background as an elementary school teacher. And so I'm used to having to answer the same question 42 times in a minute.
Oh, that's true.
And my background and my training.
And missing a few teeth. So, which could be the typical Arkansas person in your group. I'm sorry. Low-hanging fruit. All right. And then I'm just getting everybody up to date because I would hope that most of my listeners know. I started listening to you in 2017. When did you start that podcast with Melanie, the original intermittent fasting podcast?
That was 2017. Yeah.
Oh,
it was
so it was
May of
brand new.
2017. Yeah. If you started in 2017, you were early days.
I did.
You're OG.
And then I am. Absolutely. And then that was 2017. You left. You left that group in what year?
With Melanie.
That podcast with Melanie.
I did that for 5 years. I was with Melanie for 5 years, but I started a second podcast in 2018. So in 2017, I just did the intermittent fasting podcast with Melanie. Did that for 5 years. But in 2018, I added a second podcast, which is Intermittent Fasting Stories. And I was like, is anybody going to listen to this?
Oh, my gosh, it is so good.
Listen.
It's so inspiring.
I love doing it. Yeah.
Now, what do you and Sherry do now? Is that Intermittent Fasting Stories?
No, it's called Fast, Feast, Repeat. We named it after my book. Yep.
That's
Fast, Feast, Repeat, Intermittent Fasting for Life. Because after I left the Intermittent Fasting podcast, Sherry and I were doing a podcast called Life Lessons. And we had a nice core group of listeners that were loyal listeners and they listened, but the podcast wasn't growing. We did it for 2.5 years. So we basically hadn't monetized it. It was like a fun hobby, which is no problem for me. I don't mind having a fun hobby, but Sherry counted on, if she's going to work that hard, she wanted to earn some money from it.
Sure.
So people were asking, could y'all do a fasting podcast? And I'm like, I cannot manage one more podcast. But then we're like, what if we pivot? So we closed down the Life Lessons podcast and started the Fast, Feast, Repeat Intermittent Fasting Fast, Feast, Repeat Intermittent Fasting for Life, July of this past year. And we are already over 500,000 listens.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So
unbelievable. I'm writing all this down and we'll put this in the show notes in case somebody is from another planet and has never heard of you or this concept, these words called intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
So it is January. Somehow January is supposed to be the one that ushers us into size 4 jeans, and it never works. Everyone who starts that January cleanse, that January diet, by the 3rd week, you've never gotten past the book of Genesis in the Bible because you were going to read the Bible in a year or two. And you abandon your dream of running the New York City Marathon and whatever else. So we want to talk to our listeners that we don't start in January. This happens to be in January, but you start the day you start.
Tomorrow. You start tomorrow. Whenever you're listening. With the magic of podcasts, someone might be listening to this at any time.
That's true.
So the best day to start is after you have your last bite of food tonight, your last sip of whatever it is, you start. So start today, actually. Best
start
time to
today.
Start.
That's right. How did you start? When did you wait till a Monday then? Because you had diet brain, the old diet brain.
Oh, I did. I had diet brain. And, I got up to 210 pounds, like I said, and I was obese. And it was when I was on a family cruise and I saw pictures of myself in spring of 2014 that I realized, I got to do something. And I had been dabbling in intermittent fasting from 2009 to 2014, but I didn't understand the idea of it being a lifestyle. And back then, everyone who was talking about intermittent fasting said intermittent fasting works because it allows you to eat fewer calories. That's the only reason. And so I was like, well, it's like any other diet. It's just a tool. And so I would start and stop, and I didn't understand the metabolic benefits, the metabolic flexibility. I didn't understand being fat adapted. I understood none of that. I just thought I can eat fewer calories. Well, intermittent fasting was really hard. I also didn't understand the clean fast, which is one
Right.
other reason why it was hard. I didn't let my body adapt. I didn't understand fasting clean. And so I just would do it for a couple days, then stop, and it never stuck, right? So finally in 2014, I was like, followed the same, path I always did. And I ended up doing keto. It was the first time I'd ever done keto. I always
Mhm.
had dabbled in low carb, never once lost weight on low carb beyond the 4 pounds you lose right away from water weight.
Right.
Never. But for sometimes this was going to be different. So the entire summer of 2014, I did keto, full on keto. Didn't lose any weight at all.
And you're a rule abider. Like, you write things
Oh my
down.
Lord.
You
I was
follow
like,
it to the
yes,
letter of
you
the
tell
law,
me the
right.
magic number is 20. And I wasn't doing that net carb nonsense. I was like 20 grams of carbs. Like, I was eating
Okay.
very low carb and lost no weight, never felt satisfied. But because I'm a rule follower, I had I don't even know if you remember this, the Ketonics keto breath analyzer that you plugged in
Oh,
and
yeah,
you
I
blew
heard
into
about
it.
it.
You had to plug it in. It
Yes.
would charge up. You blew into it. It would show red. So I was blowing red. I was in ketosis.
So that means you were in ketosis?
Oh, yeah. I was absolutely in ketosis, losing no weight because I was eating all the time. I was not fasting. I was eating all the
That's
time.
right.
I
You
was,
weren't fasting.
yeah,
Okay.
I was fat adapted from keto, but I was burning the fat I was eating. I was putting a lot of fat in, right? Because
Yeah.
they said you could. As long as you don't eat 20 grams of fat, you're going to lose weight. Not true for my
Wow.
body. I lost 0 pounds, but I was in ketosis. So I was like, this is not working, and I hate it. So I ended up rereading the Carbohydrate Addict's Diet. Do you remember that one?
Yes.
Well,
Sure
here's
do.
the thing about that diet. Here was their plan. They wanted you to eat low carb all day long, and then every night you had one reward meal. The reward meal could have carbs, anything you want. And I'm like, you know what? That reminds me of Fast 5, the 5-hour
Yeah.
eating window, the
Dr. Bert
intermittent
Herring. Mhm.
fasting. And I'm like, and then I reread like I said, the Carbohydrate Addict's Diet. And in the introduction, the author talks about her weight loss journey. She lost over 100 pounds. She talks about how she had to fast for a blood draw, but the blood draw got postponed till the evening. So she didn't eat all day, and then she had one meal. And then that was the weight loss plan that she followed to lose over 100 pounds. She literally fasted all day long and ate one meal a day, lost over 100 pounds. But when she wrote her diet plan, she wrote it in the 90s. Fasting was certainly not on anyone's mind. She came up with the idea of low carb all day, then that one meal. I guess maybe it would sell more books. People weren't ready for fasting, but she literally did one meal a day.
But didn't you have said this before, that anytime you meet with your publisher, they're always like, Jen, how many calories or how many pounds will they lose in a certain amount of time? They always need an incentive. You were the first person not to dangle a carrot in any type of media to tell people you're just going to fast.
Yeah, that's it. And, when I switched over from keto and said, I'm done with that, I'm just going to eat one meal a day or in the afternoon or in a 5-hour window or whatever it might have been at the time, I reintroduced all the carbs, everything I wanted to eat.
Because your body thrives on carbs.
Well, my body does. I need carbs for satiety. But I immediately started losing weight. I started losing about a pound a week at that point.
Okay.
And with adding the carbs back. So I was eating within an eating window, started losing about a pound a week. And I was still getting into ketosis during the fast every day because I had my little ketonics. And I remember being blown away because at that time, no one was talking about intermittent fasting getting you into ketosis. It was just you had to eat keto to be into ketosis. And, that was it.
You've debunked that
Well,
myth.
I was like, look, I had a hamburger and fries last night for dinner, and now I am blowing ketones again.
Yep.
And I'm like, how is this possible? And so that blew my mind, the whole idea of,
Well, scientifically explain that, because I do tell that to people, and they've been with their trainer, and their trainer told them that wasn't accurate. So that's who I get in a lot of fusses with, are sometimes these personal trainers.
Yeah.
And dietitians.
Because, they're partial. There's truth behind every misleading statement, right?
Okay.
The whole idea that you can't get into ketosis unless you totally eliminate carbs, or fast for 40 days and 40 nights, whatever it might be, it gets something, forgets about that. Think about our liver. Okay. Our liver is a storage tank. Now, our liver does a lot of things. It is not only a storage tank, but I would like you to only visualize, just for this idea, think of your liver its only job in this analogy is to store glycogen or something. It's storing stuff. Your liver is a storage tank, but we're going to think about glycogen. Glycogen is a quick source of fuel that your body can use. So when your liver has glycogen in it and you're not eating, your liver dumps out the glycogen to fuel your body, keeping your blood sugar, where it needs to be. But eventually your liver is going to run out of enough glycogen to keep releasing. And then if you're metabolically healthy, like you are and I am, and people who do intermittent fasting for a while are, your body flips that metabolic switch to fat burning. And then your liver takes the fat, converts it into ketones.
Wow.
So we've been taught, if you're only looking at it through the low carb or keto community, that the only way to deplete your liver glycogen is to never put any carbs in ever again. And you're just going to eat fat. And then you're not, obviously, if you're eating fat, a lot of fat, your body is not storing a lot of glycogen in your liver because you're not consuming it, right? But if we fast, during the fast, your body depletes that liver glycogen as well. And yes, when you eat, if you're eating carbs, you put some back in. But the key is that if you're doing intermittent fasting over time, like when you start on day one, when you're fasting on day one, you've never fasted before, you've been eating carbs, you're not doing any restrictive diet, your full liver tank has got glycogen in it. When you're fasting, it depletes some of that. Then you eat
day by day.
Put some back, but you don't put back as much as your body took out. Then the next day it depletes some more, and then you put a little more back in. So gradually over, 28 days or whatever it takes for your body, your liver glycogen gets low enough that during the fast that your body has to flip that metabolic switch, and then you get into ketosis. Now, you can totally have too long of an eating window to ever get into ketosis. Like if you're eating, in a 12-hour eating window every day and you're putting lots and lots in, then your liver stays in balance. You never flip that metabolic switch. But if you're like me, I end up with probably about a 5-hour eating window every day. I'm not putting so much in every day that it totally fills my liver back up. So did I explain that well enough to make sense?
I'm very visual. And because you taught gifted and talented children for years and you have your doctorate in that, you are very visual in the way you present
Well, let me
things.
just say, the reason that fasting finally felt easy for me after keto is because I had depleted my liver glycogen. I had been doing keto, didn't lose any weight because I was putting enough fat in that's the fat my body was burning. I was making ketones from the fat I was putting in, not from my body fat. But my liver glycogen was sufficiently depleted. So when I started intermittent fasting and added all the carbs back, I wasn't able to fully, refill my liver in a 5-hour eating window. And so I just seamlessly kept going and stayed in ketosis during my fast. And then you go out of ketosis while you're eating. And, that being metabolically flexible means your body can choose whatever fuel source it needs from time to time. We are designed to be that way. We are not designed to be 100% sugar burners 24/7. I also don't think we're designed to be in ketosis 24/7. I think we are metabolically supposed to be going back and forth between fuel sources. So,
well, one thing you talk about in Fast Feast Repeat, which is a great book. Really, everyone needs to have that. Well, I love Delay Don't Deny. I mean, because I've been around all this time. I've loved that book, Fast Feast Repeat. You talk about one of your fun things because you love a quiz. You loved it when Facebook started all the quizzes. Yeah. And so you like to know if someone was the rip the Band-Aid off person or if they were someone that gradually walked into it. Now that you've written the 28-day fast start, are you giving any inclination then that people should maybe be a little keto before they start their journey?
See, that's one of the plans. Here's my new book. I'm holding it up, 28-day fast start day by day. Available now for everyone who's listening.
That's right.
Even though I'm holding up an advanced reader copy, it's available now. If you look back at Fast Feast Repeat, the Fast Feast Repeat chapter called 28-Day Fast Start has a quiz and you choose your plan. That same exact quiz, same exact plan is in this one too.
Oh, okay.
But the thing is that the easy does it approach, the very, very easiest one where you're really easing in, is based on that same idea. You
Okay.
start off and day one, you eat a low carb breakfast and a low carb lunch and then a regular dinner.
Got
That's
it.
what you do for week one. That's just on the easy does it plan. If you're rip off the Band-Aid, maybe you're starting, I can't remember, is it an 8-hour window you start with in week one? You're just skipping breakfast
I
and
think
that's
that's right.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you just
Mhm.
skip breakfast and you just go
Mhm.
right in. But I really do think that there's no, it's not a coincidence that the time that intermittent fasting stuck for me is when I started fully fat adapted. I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
Yes, you were easing on down the road a little
Yeah.
simpler than somebody
Yep.
who came from a standard American diet, the SAD
Right.
diet, which is an addiction. I mean, it
Oh,
takes
yeah.
a minute to detox from that.
Yeah.
But so that is a good way to put it. Now, another one of your early addictions you talked about was your frothy coffee you would have in the afternoon as a school teacher. The kids
Yeah.
even knew
Yep.
when Miss Stevens had her coffee and it was 0 calorie and zero, it
Right.
was stevia this, Splenda that. And we now know it sabotaged your ability
Mhm.
to burn fat. So it kind
Yep.
of explained the science behind that and why it's important to just drink water, people.
Well, if people don't want to take my word for it, here's what you Google. Google insulin anti-lipolytic
Okay.
PubMed. I
Okay.
always put that word PubMed at the end of anything if you're trying to
Yes.
find the research, because that'll take you right to all the published journal articles instead of like the nonsense that you just find on the internet. So,
Yes.
insulin anti-lipolytic PubMed. This is not, like woo-woo craziness. This is like
Hmm.
people know insulin is a storage hormone. It is
A
what our
fat
body.
storing, a
Well,
fat storing
yeah. Well,
hormone.
it does lead to storing, but it also
Yeah.
if you think about it through the lens of diabetes, we all have heard of insulin. Most people only think of it as something diabetics have to inject. I have a diabetic cat. He's fat. He gets insulin shots twice a day.
Because he has insulin shots.
Well, he has to have insulin. We have to have insulin. Insulin is
We
not
do.
bad. We have to
Right.
have it. But you don't want to have too much. That's the
Right.
problem. Like literally everything. There's a sweet, oops, sorry, banging my microphone because I'm talking with my hands. There's a sweet spot for everything. Somewhere between 0 and too much is where you're supposed to be. And insulin is one of those things. Insulin is for storing. When we think of it, like I said, with a diabetic, like my dad is a type 2 diabetic. His blood sugar goes way too high. And then he has to inject more insulin. So it will lower his blood
insulin
sugar.
is not doing its job. Insulin's job is to take the glucose and usher it to the cells. So in your
Exactly.
dad's case, because if
He's
glucose is
insulin
getting too
resistant.
high,
Yeah.
okay, his
Yep.
insulin is resistant. There
Yep.
you go.
And that's what type 2 diabetes really is. Type 1 diabetes is the opposite. It's when your pancreas doesn't produce sufficient insulin to manage your blood sugar and you have to
Right.
take insulin. But with type 2 diabetes, it actually is a disease of too much insulin.
Mhm.
And so then your body becomes insulin resistant. Most people have probably heard that terminology, insulin resistance, but you really have too much insulin, but then you still need more and more and more to get your blood sugar down. And now you're injecting more and more just to do the same job. Then eventually it might burn out your pancreas. And now you completely, it's like I don't know what they call it. Is it type 1? I can't remember.
There is a type 1.5 now.
But you get to the point with type 2 diabetes that now you're insulin dependent forever and your pancreas is not functioning properly anymore because you've overworked it. So when it comes to insulin, we want to have insulin low when we're in the fasted state because we're not taking in anything that's going to need to be stored, right? We want to release what's already there. Our stored fat, our liver glycogen. We want to use what's already in our bodies. Your body has plenty of fuel in it right this minute. Every person listening, your body has tons of fuel in it. It's got, like I said, the glycogen stored in your muscles, stored in your liver, also plenty of fat in there stored. Even if you're a healthy weight, you've still got a lot more fat than you might think in your body, but we want to use that up. But now let's imagine insulin is high. Well, that is anti-lipolytic, like I said, which means anti-fat burning. Lipolysis is fat burning. So if your levels of insulin are high, it's kind of like your body can't even see all that fat. It's like you can't get to it. It's like locked behind, these high levels of insulin. And so we need to lower our insulin. Fasting is the best way to do it. But here's where it gets tricky. We've been so trained as calories in, calories out, that we think that if something has 0 calories, that it's perfectly fine to have, like a diet soda. 0 calories in your coffee, stevia with the flavoring in there. I would always drink, coffee. I would put stevia in there, cinnamon. It was delicious in my coffee. And I thought, well, it has 0 calories. How bad could it be? Well, I read the obesity code. Well, yeah, I read the obesity code in 2016. And that is where I learned about the cephalic phase insulin response. Cephalic means brain, related to our brain. And so they did this, there have been plenty of studies, but one that really sticks out to me, they did with rats or mice. They painted the oral cavity of these little rodents with an artificial sweetener, 0 calories. They didn't even swallow it. Okay. All they did was taste it. They painted their oral cavity with this sweetener, 0 calorie. And those little rodent pancreases released insulin in response. That was the cephalic phase insulin response. And it was because, think about this, why does our body release insulin? Well, to lower our blood sugar. We're going to need to lower our blood sugar. So if you're having something sweet at any time in life history other than the modern day, you were having honey, fruit, something that was going to raise your glucose, because all the things in nature that are sweet have blood sugar response coming along later. Once your body digests that strawberry or that honey, your blood sugar is going to go up. So the brain says,
let me interrupt you too. This is where people will say they demonize the one sugar, but not the other.
Yeah.
But it's all the same to your pancreas.
Well, the brain doesn't know. Your brain just says, ooh, I know what that taste means. It's sweet.
Yes.
We're going to have higher blood sugar soon. So let's get ready for it. Pancreas, go ahead and send out some insulin. And so that's what happened with these little rodents. Artificial sweetener in the mouth. Brain said, oops, cephalic phase insulin response. Pancreas released some insulin. So insulin is up. They actually then took that a step further and severed the nerves from the tongue to the brain. Repeated the experiment. Painted the oral cavity with the artificial sweetener. The mice could no longer taste it because the nerves were severed. They did not have an insulin response. So whenever I hear somebody say, and there are plenty of people out in the health world who claim this sweetener doesn't cause an insulin response or that one doesn't, all the time. And I'm like, you can't fool. I mean, your brain doesn't know, oh, that one's allulose. It doesn't. I mean, your brain just goes sweetness. Anyway,
I see it all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so someone is listening to this, and their book will come in tomorrow, or it'll download immediately on Audible. But they have to finish this important podcast first,
right?
And you're giving them a few options on their 28-day fast start,
right?
What are some things they have? Because this is one thing people always ask me: what foods do I need to buy, Lisa, before I get started fasting? And I'm like, yeah, you don't buy any foods. What products do I have? No, you don't buy anything.
Yeah.
Here's
what you need to have. You need to have a really good quality coffee that you can drink black if you like coffee.
Yeah.
Because black coffee is the only way you should be drinking coffee while you're fasting. We talked a minute ago about not wanting the sweetness. So you're not going to put any sweeteners in your coffee. You're not going to put any.
And no splash of milk that you tell me about.
No splash of milk. And, milk is dairy. It is nature's perfect food for growing mammal babies. Now, I am not anti-dairy. I love dairy. It is delicious. I'm not going to tell you not to have dairy, but it's not fasting.
Yeah, and it's not fasting.
It's not fasting. It is literally the food nature designed for the period of life when a baby is growing the fastest it will ever grow. Think about that. It actually does cause an insulin response as well.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, but milk is a free food. No, it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit, you're actually going to make the fast harder. So you want to have a good quality coffee. If you think you hate black coffee, you probably have crappy coffee.
Oh, so there really is a trick because I'm not a coffee drinker, so I don't really know how to walk this path with my clients,
Yeah.
except for I've heard you say you can put salt in it and whirl it
Well, no,
up.
I don't like salt in it. That's crazy talk, but you
Oh,
can.
it
You're
was
allowed
somebody
to.
then
No,
during
people
your
do say that.
okay.
Yep. And like apparently, if you put a sprinkle of salt in your coffee grounds before you brew it, it might cut some of the bitterness. I
Okay.
tried it just because I wanted to see, and I didn't like it because I like black coffee and I'm used to it. Now, when I started, I did not like black coffee, but our taste buds regenerate in like a couple weeks.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
That's amazing because all of you that's what started with your candy coffee and your,
Hot milkshake, I call
hot
it.
milkshake. A lot of you do make the switch, so it's just part of the evolutionary
Yes.
process then
Yes, you
of our
can
taste buds. That's
absolutely train
interesting.
your taste buds, and then they are different. And what's amazing to me is I still think I'm kind of a super taster, but I could not tolerate
Oh, yeah.
any bitter foods. And like, for example, I didn't like bitter vegetables. I
So
didn't
no
like
collard
arugula.
greens,
No,
yeah,
I
no
didn't like
arugula.
Brussels sprouts. All of
Mhm.
that tasted really gross to me. But now I like it. And I swear it's
Wow.
because I've opened up my palate to no longer like think bitter flavor profile gross. I now
Mhm.
like those things and
Mhm.
seek them out. But having a good quality coffee, so that's the one thing you can buy. Go buy a good quality coffee. I was at my
Sure.
sister's about a month or so ago, and she likes her frou coffee, so whatever. But she had this. It was disgusting.
As a black coffee,
It
it was
was
bad?
so gross. Yes, it was really low quality, old,
Oh.
gross coffee.
So do
Sorry,
you no,
sister.
right. Well, no, there she goes. There
Yeah.
Christmas is gonna be really difficult next year.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
So do you ever then have candy coffee? Do you ever put whipped cream and all the pumpkin
Well, I
spice and
can
all
in my
that
eating window if I
in your
want
eating
to.
window? But
And you know what? I might if I'm out and about and I'm at a little coffee shop and my window's open. It needs to be a really high quality coffee though. Yesterday my window was open and I was at the grocery store, and we have a Starbucks in our grocery store.
yeah.
And so I was like, my window is open and they had this new holiday flavor that
Yeah.
looked so good. And I'm like, it was a chai. It was like a gingerbread chai. And I like a chai. I
Yeah.
like those flavors. So I'm like, I'm going to try it because my window's open. It was so gross. I don't know what they put in their mixes, but it tastes like rat poison to me now.
Oh,
And
great.
I didn't like it. So I threw it away. I did not like it. So
Here's one thing I know. When people make the switch to black coffee, we just saved you 30 or $50 a month
it's true.
just for starters.
It's
And
true.
then when you start realizing I really don't need to drive through and get anything for breakfast.
Yeah.
We're saving you another yeah, people, you're going to be rich by
It's
March of
true.
2024 if you listen to us.
Well, there is a problem though, Lisa, and that
What is it?
is you become a food snob to the
Yeah,
point
for
that
sure.
everything must be window worthy. So now you got to have more expensive food in your eating window.
No,
So you're
that is
buying
true.
the $20 cheeses because you're
No,
worth it.
right. There are a lot of filet mignon I eat around
There
here
you go.
because I'm not eating
Exactly. The
anything
crap.
during the day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so 28-day fast start. You can
Yep.
start tomorrow, and a good quality coffee for those who drink coffee.
You
Let's
don't
go
have to
back.
drink coffee, by the way. People who don't want to drink coffee, don't start drinking it. You don't have
And
to. It's just
that would
if
be
you
me.
like
I mean,
it. Yeah.
you could put a gun to my head, and I'm still not going to drink it
Yeah.
because it tastes like coffee.
Coffee
Okay.
is not required, but if you like coffee, it must be black. But plain
right.
water, I'm drinking my plain water right here
right.
in my
I've
Georgia
got my
Tech cup.
I've got my sparkling. I have a new
Yep.
company. This is an
Ooh,
Arkansas company because the
I
problem
like.
with our Topo Chico, it had high PUFAs or something.
That's
High.
old though, right? That information's from 2020 and then they fixed it. Did you know
So
that?
is it no, I knew that they were it was tweaked or
Yeah.
something,
Yep.
but so we're not going to die because
No, that report. What's funny is Consumer Reports released that information in 2020, and there was, they're like, these are the brands. There were a bunch of brands that had higher levels than others, and
and
immediately
they're the
those,
forever chemicals is what we
yeah,
think
oh yeah,
that's in these waters.
immediately those companies took steps to cut them.
Smart.
But everybody
Smart.
just keeps talking about that 2020
Yeah.
numbers, and like that's no. I drink Topo Chico in the glass bottle, and
You do. Yeah, the glass bottle.
yeah. Mm-hmm. And
So
yeah.
this is actually an Arkansas product. It's Mountain Valley. There's a spring and sparkling, and then it comes in a real big bottle. And then if I don't think Topo Chico ever came in a real big bottle. I don't know liters. The other one may be a 2 liter or something
Wow.
bottle. And so I can open that and then kind of sip on that throughout the day. Cause if you close it real tight, real quick,
Does
you
it
kind
stay
of
fizzy?
preserve. Yes. You
Yeah.
kind of preserve some of the fizz. And that's what I think we all want to do. That's why the brands we thought we were going to drink, the Perrier and all that, the plastic bottle, blech.
Yeah. I actually like sparkling water in a can, and it has to be unflavored. Everybody stay away from those flavored varieties that like Kroger brand sparkling water. Somebody who came on my podcast told me about it, and she is right.
And they're cheap.
Yeah.
They're real cheap. So they're good to have. So green tea is something else we can have. And
you can have green tea.
Explain why. It's because it comes from the bitter profile, and the bitter profile does not stimulate an insulin response.
Right. Plain tea. And when I say tea, if you walk down the tea aisle, 99% of that is not actually tea. It's like herbal whatever. Herbal teas, no. Most of them do not have a bitter flavor profile. And like you can see the name of it, like apple cinnamon delight, not part of a clean fast.
Ding, ding, ding. Right. Right. That's not your tea.
Anything that makes your brain think food is coming in, avoid it. Food flavors, spices, all of that. Avoid all of that. But actual plain tea, real tea, not Earl Grey. Earl Grey has flavoring in it, but real tea, whether it's black tea, green tea, even white tea, unless you're in Australia, because the white tea to them means you're adding milk, and we're not going to add milk. But there's a variety of tea called white tea, and that's just plain tea. If it's plain tea, you can have it. A bitter flavor profile does not stimulate an insulin response,
which is fascinating.
Yeah.
So flat water, sparkling water. And again, no flavors, no additives. The hardest transition, I've mentioned this before, is if you're a drive-through person, they just assume at Starbucks you want. One time, Chris Fisher got me a hot tea, and they put whipped cream in it. Hot green tea.
Yeah.
How to toss it. I mean, I'm like, no. And he even said a plain green tea. They go, okay.
And they put it in there anyway.
Yes, because to people, they're like, what's offensive about this? Well, the insulin response.
Yeah.
So that's funny. What you consume during the fast. Right. And then during the feast, you can have your candy coffee.
You can have whatever you want. Now, that's a very broad statement. And I talk in Fast Feast Repeat about what that means. Eat whatever you want. Emphasis on you. Instead of, don't interpret it as eat whatever you want, because that's those are two different phrases.
Yes.
Eat whatever you want. I think I might have the only intermittent fasting book on the market that doesn't tell you what to eat, right? Because every single intermittent fasting book is slanted.
It does.
If you like low carb and that's the way you feel your best, you're going to really love everything by Jason Fung, because all of his books are low carb focused more so, and his approach. And if you want to be whole food plant-based, you're really going to love Mastering Diabetes, because they're whole food plant-based.
Well,
but they have fasting in there too.
Let's talk about the elephant in the living room. You almost broke the internet a few months ago when you just posted one time that you were eating whole food plant-based because your father had been in the hospital. You got to the Mastering Diabetes people. And then about a week or two later on your podcast, you're like, okay, not so fast.
Yeah.
And it shows that it's what we call bioindividuality. What works for you in the season. Your seasons will change too of what works best for your body. So kind of explain the genesis of what happened.
Well, here's the thing. When you start wearing a CGM, you learn a lot of stuff.
Which I now am requiring all my clients to use.
Here's something interesting. I've worn a CGM. I've never worn a CGM while eating low carb, because I will never go back to eating low carb because I don't enjoy it. I don't like it. And I will
Not a good fit for you.
Not a good fit for me. I don't enjoy it. I didn't like it. And my body needs carbs for satiety. But my dad, type 2 diabetes, hospitalized recently. I was wearing a CGM, and I'm like, I just want to be healthy, what works for me. I learned through the Zoe program that my body doesn't clear fat well.
So is that part of a blood test that they do?
Yes. They have these special muffins that I think now they're using cookies, but it's really fascinating research.
Yeah.
Tim Spector out of the UK, and it's great.
But now
great
he's
research.
A vegan, right?
He's not a vegan. Mm-mm.
Oh, he's not.
Tim Spector is not. He eats all things. He does eat less meat now, I think, than maybe he used to. He's gut microbiome folks. He's definitely not a vegan, and they don't tell you to be vegan.
Okay, good.
Yeah, not even a little bit. Now, you might be thinking of Dr. Will Bulshewitz that wrote Fiber Fueled. He's a vegan, but he didn't used to be a vegan until he started really learning about the gut. So he changed how he eats based on what he knows about the gut. Anyway, so I learned my body doesn't clear fat well. And wearing the CGM, when I redid the Zoe testing, I did it again in October of 2022. They give you these muffins and then you see what happens, and you have them first thing in the morning, and then you have another set of muffins. They test your blood and they see what happens. The first set of muffins is a high fat muffin. So they're like, they design them and it's vegetable oil fat, but it's like high fat muffin and they taste disgusting. But then you don't eat anything else for a few hours. Then you have the second set of muffins, which is a low fat muffin. Well, I would like you to predict, which time did my blood sugar go up the highest? When I had the high fat muffin, it was still a muffin. It still had, all the wheat and all the refined and the sugar. It still had sugar in it. Or did my blood sugar go up higher when I had a low fat muffin that was a higher carb, higher sugar muffin? When did my blood sugar?
So higher carb on the low fat. I would think by sitting at the feet of Jason Fung that would give you a higher glucose reading.
It didn't. My body
now, how is that possible?
Because this is what I learned from the Mastering Diabetes guys. Especially, and I'm a big believer in bioindividuality, right?
Yeah,
that our bodies are not all exactly the same. That is what is so fascinating. For me, I don't clear fat well. And, the test showed that after the Zoe test came back. But too much fat in your body can make you insulin resistant, because it actually kind of, think about like if you're doing a lot of deep frying in your kitchen, everything gets all gunked up.
Yeah.
It's the Mastering Diabetes guys have these great graphics about that show that it's the fat. When you have the high fat and the high carb together, the fat kind of gunks up the works to the point that the glucose can't get into your cells.
Well, I can
so
see.
It stays stuck in your blood.
I can see that with the high carb.
Well, if you're having high fat and high carb together, like those first muffins were high fat and high carb.
Delicious.
Well, no, they're not delicious. They're disgusting because they're science. Okay. They taste like science. I actually have I can show you this. I have I have saved in my photo albums because it was just fascinating to me. I saved the blood sugar results. So after the high fat muffins, and I was fasted, I hadn't eaten anything since the night before. My blood sugar went up as high as 126 after the high fat muffins. 126. Now that's not crazy high. I have pretty good blood sugar control.
Yeah, you do.
But my blood sugar went up to 126 after the high fat muffins. Then, and I ate them.
That was a 2-hour window.
I ate first thing in the morning. Then later in the morning, you eat at noon, I ate the low fat muffins, but they're still high carb. Okay. They're low fat. My blood sugar, look what my blood sugar did after the low fat muffins. They only went up to 101.
Yeah. Yeah.
101 was it. And you would actually think it might even have gone higher after the second eating experience, because you already had the muffins from the first experience in your body. So you would think it would go higher the second time, but mine did not. So when I look at this data and I'm like, high fat muffins, my blood sugar went up to 126. Low fat muffins, my blood sugar went up to 101. Clearly, my body has a better glycemic response when I'm not having as much fat. So I overcorrected. Keep this in mind. 126 is not a bad blood sugar response. Okay. So I was like panicked by the idea that my dad, is type 2 diabetic and he's in the hospital and he's not doing well. And I want to live healthy and, do all the things. So I'm like, well, I have proof that my body does better with lower fat. So I'm going to do that. Well, you know what? I could do it. My blood sugar was so good when I was eating whole food, plant-based, low fat that I thought my CGM was broken. I thought it was miscalibrated because
what would it be? 80 to 100, 80 and 90s?
I had like a soft pretzel with mustard after dinner one night. My blood sugar spiked up to 99. I mean, that doesn't even make sense. Whoa. But I was eating very low fat, whole food, plant-based. My blood sugar was so low but it didn't spike up either. It didn't like go up to 160 and crash out. No, it never went up high. It just stayed. It was amazing to see. But food is so delicious and there's a lot of pleasure. I love dairy. I like a good burger. So I'm like, wait a minute.
And butter. You like butter.
I love butter. And so I thought my CGM was miscalibrated, like I said. So I said, well, I've got to test this. So I had like a meal where I had like sausage and cream and it was like a soup, beans. So it was like a bean soup, but I added a lot of fat, and I had bread, but I added butter. So I had been eating lots of carbs, but low fat. So I just added fat to what I had already been eating. And my blood sugar went higher, just like it did with the Zoe test. And so I was like, well, this really is true. My body does better with whole food, plant-based, low fat. But I had that delicious meal with that delicious soup. And I said, and I don't care, because I mean, literally it only went up to like 125. And I'm like, why am I forcing myself to eat whole food, plant-based, low fat, which is really, really hard to do and restrictive?
Yes.
When my blood sugar wasn't bad to start with, and it's not bad after eating these higher fat foods. So why am I doing this? And so I'm like, okay, calm down. I gave myself diet brain, basically. And that just shows how, some of these tools that we've got, like CGMs, are amazing.
They are.
But it was sending me down a path I didn't need to go down, chasing things I didn't really need to be chasing when I was really healthy. Now, if I were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, let's say me personally, Jen Stevens, if I did develop diabetes, food is medicine. I would do better with a whole food, plant-based, lower fat approach. But I don't need to do that.
What did Dr. Bickman and Dr. Fung saying about that type of research? I'd love to hear it. I mean, the foremost authorities.
You can't argue with that. But, I was just watching, Diet Doctor?
Yeah.
Well, I just watched one of his videos today. He's doing some work with satiety. And it's a YouTube video that he's got about that.
Because that's why I was wondering what your satiety did when you didn't have the fat.
Well, I was okay. I was fine. I was eating a lot more in a longer window. Like I needed to have a longer window to get enough food in. I was also losing weight. When I was eating whole food, plant-based, low carb, low fat, whole food, plant-based, low fat, I was losing weight. Now, I don't need to lose weight. I don't want to lose weight. No. But I was losing weight. And I don't want to lose weight or need to lose weight. So that's just another interesting component there. But I was watching Andreas Einfeld. Is that how you say his last name? E-N? I can't remember, but he's Diet Doctor. But he did a
that's
talk.
Diet Doctor. I was thinking of somebody else. Okay.
No, he runs a low carb website. Diet Doctor is the name of his website. And he does a wonderful talk. It was at like the 2023 low carb. I can pull up the picture of it and tell you the talk that he did about it. And he talks about that whole carbohydrate insulin hypothesis. Okay.
All right.
And he was at, I don't know where he was, low carb something, but the name of it is Andreas Einfeld, and it's EENFELDT MD presentation, low carb protein or satiety for metabolic health.
All right.
And you remember the book, Good Calories, Bad Calories?
Yeah. Gary Taubes, sure.
Gary Taubes. And that was it came out in 2007.
Yeah.
And
it's really the OG of the, besides Bert Herring stuff, but it was early
really
adopters. Yeah.
Well, he talks about, and Dr. Andreas, whose last name I'm sure I'm saying incorrectly, low carb, let's just call him Diet Doctor. Diet Doctor, in his talk, talks about this carbohydrate insulin model of obesity that really Gary Taubes talks about in Good Calories, Bad Calories. Right. Well, guess what? Diet Doctor no longer believes that is the cause of obesity.
Really?
The whole, and hearing him say that and saying how his thoughts have changed, that really impressed me because, when you're like known for being the low carb, he's saying it publicly. But here's the thing. Insulin is anti-lipolytic. That is true. If you eat a bunch of highly refined carbs and sugar, then your blood sugar is going to go up higher. That is true. And so that part of it isn't wrong. But to say carbs are the problem, carbs always cause high insulin, carbs always my own results show exactly what the Mastering Diabetes guys show. And that is that for me, lower fat keeps my blood sugar lower than higher fat does. So interesting.
Wow.
But Diet Doctor's research now is focused on satiety, and it's fascinating to see. They're scoring foods based on satiety, and it's based on like satiety per calorie kind of thing. I know we don't count calories. They don't want you to count calories either.
Right.
But it's a matter of like what foods are going to give you satiety versus what are not. Like here are some very low satiety foods. Butter is a low satiety food, for example.
Is it really?
If you just eat nothing but butter, it is not very satisfying per calorie. Yep. The highest satiety food, raw spinach.
No.
Yeah.
Now, see, I can't wrap my brain around
per calorie. Now, you can if all you ate was raw spinach, you will not be obese. You will not. If you just eat raw spinach all the time, but I mean, no one wants to eat that way. They're not telling you to eat that way either. But it's a matter of designing your food so that you feel satisfied. So I love the work that he's doing right now. Like a chocolate chip cookie is very low satiety. But a chicken breast with broccoli, very high satiety. So I love listening to the Diet Doctor say how, guess what? Low carb is actually not what everybody should or needs to be doing. He is still low carb. He is still low carb. That is what makes him feel great.
Yeah.
But he meat with vegetables. That's what makes him feel great.
Yeah.
If I just have meat with vegetables, I do not feel satisfied. My body requires carbs for satiety.
You need the baked potato.
I need something starchy. I need beans, or I need a potato to feel satisfied, or a sourdough roll. But chocolate chip cookies also don't make me satisfied. I could eat like all the chocolate chip cookies and not feel satisfied, but a giant baked potato with butter and sour cream,
you don't want any more.
I'm going to be really satisfied. So I think the future of what we're going to be talking about in health and wellness is eating for satiety, not for calories, not for macros, but for satiety, because you don't want to overeat. Even with intermittent fasting, if you eat too much food, you will not lose weight. Your body has no need. Like, you know how I talked about before when I didn't lose weight on keto for all those months, even though I did it perfectly, I was putting in too much fuel. My body never had to go to my stored fuel. I was in ketosis. I never needed to use my stored fuel. So with intermittent fasting, it's about finding a way to eat within your eating window, but you don't want to eat more fuel than your body can get through.
Right.
And then you're going to tap into it during the fast, and it's finding that balance.
And this is why you're the queen of
well,
fasting. Jen Stevens.
I'm just curious. I'm a curious person.
I know you are.
And I don't like one size fits all solutions because we're all so very different. And that's why I don't have an eating plan for you. You're going to figure out what works for you.
Yeah. Right. You really don't. And it is, Laurie Lewis always reminds us, love the foods that love you back.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
I love when she says that.
Yeah. The more you learn about your body, the more you'll say, okay, this is what works for me. And not apologize. We don't have to. That's one thing I feel like intermittent fasting has taught me. I never go to dinner with people and go, I'm going to drink a Diet Coke because I'm going to have dessert. I don't have to justify what I eat to anybody. Nope. And there's so much freedom. Or the times that I go to dinner and I don't eat because I've already eaten that day.
Yep.
It doesn't matter.
Or they say, would you like to see the dessert menu? I'm like, yes.
And sometimes I say yes. Absolutely. So there is so much freedom in intermittent fasting. Thank you for ushering in that message all these years. And Jen, being teachable and humble enough to admit the Mastering Diabetes immediate plan wasn't your plan for life. You needed to tweak a little.
Well, and I do think if I were one of the people that were like, I'm going to optimize and do what's best for me, I would be eating that way. But I am a human who likes pleasure in my life, and I get a great deal of pleasure from eating butter and putting a little cream in my soup.
Or Parmesan cheese or whatever.
Or having a burger, right? So, I don't want to chase perfection that isn't as enjoyable. I want to enjoy my life. That's really, really important. Food needs to be delicious. We are designed to eat food for pleasure. So if I had diabetes, I would 100% start following their plan. For me, that would work better. But I don't.
And you never will.
I don't think I will.
Because the way you live. Thank you so much. Happy 2024 to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Lisa Fisher Said podcast. Be sure to hit subscribe and download all the episodes and leave a review, won't you? The Lisa Fisher Said podcast is produced by ClantonCreative.com.